Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel. My name is Rachel Parker. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the Anglican priest in the Diocese of Edmonton, the Anglican Church of Canada, and I serve as the rector or the priest in charge of St. Thomas Anglican Church in Wainwright and St. Mary's in Edgerton, small town and a village in the southeastern part of Alberta in Canada. And I'm glad that you're here with me today. We are going to take a little bit of a break. I will be away from tomorrow, the 22nd of September, until Sunday, the 2nd of October, but back on Monday, October 3rd, because I'm going on a little bit of holiday time and heading back to Ontario to see our family because my husband's Rob's sister Lori is getting married, and we get to go back for that and visit some family and just take a little bit of a break and get rested. And haven't seen a lot of my family for, I think it's 3 years now. So be really good to see everybody again. So this is a little hiatus. I took one a few weeks ago for some summer holidays, but I'll be back on October 3rd. So hope you'll join me. Today, I'd like to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, because I don't know whether you're having this in the States for those of you who are watching south of the border, but out here in the West, we have been dealing with some forest fires. Jasper, which is of my favorite of the two national parks where the people can ski and hike and do things like that, has been dealing with some significant forest fires in the last couple of weeks. And as far east as we are, pretty close to the Saskatchewan border, we too are being impacted by the smoke. Mostly that the air quality hasn't been too bad, not great, but not bad. But it's most visible at night. The moon has this really eerie reddish glow, and sometimes, like at dusk, there seems to be a haze when the sun's going down. It's really quite beautiful. But it's a reminder that something really wild and crazy is happening. But it's also a reminder that that wild and crazy thing is not an unknown thing. Forest fires happen all the time. And the people who live in areas where they know there could be forest fires are used to that. Now, sometimes it's absolutely horrifying. This year, again, Lytton, BC was hit as it was last year with both forest fire and a flood. And they got hit again this year. But we have lots of people who are tremendous at fighting fires and doing what they do. So we're in good shape there. But forest fires, as horrible as they are like nature's way in some ways of regenerating. When a forest gets old and dry and brittle, a forest fire can wipe out all the old and allows for the beginning of the new. For the animals, for the most, like a lot of animals are driven out of the forest from the fire, so they go away and then they can come back. But there are new kinds of flora and fauna that can grow when the ash is there. There are things that grow because the earth has changed. It's sort of mulched up. It's like nature's way of saying a new generation must begin. And so there are actually beautiful flowers that will grow for the first couple of years after a forest fire that never grow any other times. And the seeds that birds will bring with them and deposit from other places when they come back will grow other things, and animals, a new infestation, so to speak, of animals can happen, and all of these things. So yes, a forest fire is absolutely devastating, but in God's world, new things can be generated where tragedy once was. It doesn't ever mean that a forest fire was a good thing. And lots of things happen that are horrible because of them. But in the aftermath, good things can happen. The same thing with the flood. I am rereading a book called Wholehearted Faith by Rachel Held Evans, because in my churches, after my holidays, we're going to be doing this as a book study. And I'm going to try to do something online as well for those people who would like to study along with it. I'll be doing a 1 chapter a week study starting in October, so that it'll take longer than the book study at churches does, but people can read along with me, and I'll ask some questions and share my thoughts, and in comments people can respond. But in rereading this, something really hit me. She says here, a flood can bring immense destruction. We know that from contemporary headlines as well as from ancient scripture. What I appreciate about Caitlin Curtis's reflection in a book called Glory Happening, though, is that she reminds us that this isn't the only story. A flood is a funny thing, she continues. For all the grief that can come with it, it also brings a deep and full cleansing, wiping everything away to start again. New spaces, new grasses, spreading seeds and digging up roots. Maybe the trees said, finally I can drink my fill. My roots have been thirsty for so long. And maybe the grass whispered, in the spring I will be greener than ever because the water has given me new birth, new life. Maybe the call of the wilderness is to ask us to think more deeply, more broadly, more adventurously, more boldly about the maybes. And then she goes on to talk about the wilderness, and I'll talk about that in the book study. But the maybes, the things that can happen after a forest fire or a flood. Sometimes I hear people say, it was God's will when something bad happens. And I just shudder when somebody says it was God's will, or, the bane of my existence. God needed her or him. When someone has died, especially a child or a parent or someone who's died well before we're sort of ready to let them go. There's something, when somebody dies in their 70s or 80s or 90s or even 100, where it's difficult, like with the Queen dying at 96. It's hard. We don't want to say goodbye. Someone we love has been taken from us and we don't see them any longer. We can't go and visit. But it's not a tragedy. It doesn't break our hearts. It hurts our hearts, but it doesn't break our hearts. But when a child has died or a teenager takes their own life, or a parent, a young parent dies, it doesn't happen with suicide. But I've heard so many times someone saying to a grieving loved one, God needed them, especially with children. My ass, God needed that child. That is, the theology is just plain wrong. It is a cop-out. It is a way of saying to someone, I don't know what to say to you, and I don't want to feel bad because you feel bad, so I'm going to say something nice. That's not nice. Think about it. If somebody is struggling with their relationship with God because their child has just died, or their brother or sister, or their best friend has just died, and someone comes up to them and says, well, God needed them. Are you going to feel comfortable that this is a good God? That this is a God who will comfort you, that God was so needy. God was so, what's the word I'm looking for? God was so selfish that God needed to take that child back to God's self because God needed them more. Hell no, not even close. God does not need us. God does not need our bodies to die so that God can have a happy clappy little room of people around him who are praising him, and he's got angels for that. No, God didn't need them. Death happens, tragedy happens, and when that happens, there is no easy fix. A forest fire happens, people are chased out of their homes, animals are killed or are chased out of their spaces. Trees, beautiful old trees have died. Terror reigns. Yes, it happens. The question becomes, how do we deal with that when it happens? Forest fires and floods are devastating in the nature of what they are. They are devastating. The way the death of or the illness of a loved one is devastating. But we do not live in the devastation. Like the forest fire or the flood, the forest fire will stop. The flames will die. The earth will cool. The flood will recede, and the devastation will be left behind. And yet, new seeds have been laid. Trees have been watered. The soil has changed. New possibilities happen. Out of the devastation can come new life. It doesn't give us back the old life. We will still grieve the old life. But new life can be born, is born. And the same thing happens for us, that when we grieving, when we have been devastated by something, whether it's a death or a diagnosis or a job loss, We need to take the time to be there in the devastation, in the tragedy. But then we also need to recognize that we can't live there. There is no life living in that. But new life can grow, and we can adapt, and we can survive, and we can thrive. The way new life comes to after forest fires, the way new life and greenness and new possibilities can happen after a flood. In our lives, when something massive changes things, we too can be reborn into new life. We can develop new ways of being and thinking and living. We can adapt how we think, how we feel about things. Even, I dare say, go right back to how we feel about God. When something devastating has happened in our lives, whether it's we've lost our home to a fire or a flood, or whether someone has died, or we've lost our job, or we have been diagnosed with something devastating, who we were in our relationship with God before that will be different than who we are in our relationship with God in the middle of it. And who we are after it, in the aftermath, in the opportunities for new growth and everything, and new life coming, our relationship with God will be different then too. And that's okay. It's okay to be angry with God. It's okay to ask questions of God. It's okay to bargain with God. God's got big shoulders, can handle it. What's not okay is just giving up. Being that bird who just says, I'm not going to bother trying. I'm not going to flee from a forest fire. I'm not going to fly into the top of a tree in the flood. I'm just going to die. I'm going to give it up. That bird who tries to escape, who tries to fly higher, who flies away and comes back to build again, to start again in that habitat that has been theirs, is like us when we decide, you know what, I don't like God right now very much, or I'm grateful to God that God has given me the opportunity to be able to live through this devastation and to try again. Wherever we might be in our relationship with God, it will be different than it was before, and that is okay. Relationships, if they stay where they are, grow stagnant and then become fodder for forest fires and floods. What needs to happen is that we need to continue to grow. We need to be open to being okay to say, okay, God, what next? And maybe, blessed be, that it be a good thing. But in that what next can be the difficulty of a tussling relationship, to blame God for the forest fire, to be angry for what is lost in a flood, to be ticked off because things weren't what they were once. But then also to know that God's patience and God's creativity and God's love for us says to us, come now and let's find out what can happen anew. Where might we go from here? Not ignoring what has been, not denying that we are in grief, not denying that something horrible has happened, but also both acknowledging and living in the truth that what was difficult has happened, but also living in the truth that what is beautiful can also happen. Like that flood, as the author says, new spaces, new grasses, spreading seeds and digging up roots. Maybe the trees said, finally, I can drink my fill. My roots have been thirsty for so long. And maybe the grass whispered, in the spring, I will be greener than ever because this water has given me new life. Where is new life for you? Where do you feel the waters seeping into your soul and flooding the roots of who you are? Just some thoughts to consider as I take off for a week and a half, and I'll be back, and I'm going to take this week and a half to allow this time to fill me up with new water, that my roots will be filled, that the grass that is me will be ready to say I'll be greener than I was before. Because when I get back, I will be beginning a brand new relationship with the church in Vermilion, St. Saviour's, and I will become the rector of 3 different churches. And the opportunities for God to do a new thing will be abound. And I am excited for that time. And I'm excited about what this venue will be, our church at home congregation, our community of people who believe and people who don't believe, and all of whom I love, all of whom help me to grow into who God is calling me to be. So have a good time off, and I will see you again on the 3rd of October. God bless you, and thank you for being you, entirely who you are, exactly the way you are. Have a great week and a half, everybody.